Welcome everybody to a different version of Precarious Parenting. Normally it is an audio podcast, but today I'm doing a video podcast with the wonderful Erika Bugbee. And Erika and I do similar work, and Erika's over in the States and I'm based in the UK. And we wanted to have a really nice informal chat where we could share stories from younger people. So we're going to share testimonials and have younger people voices coming through our discussion. And we're doing this as a celebration of the 50th anniversary of Sydney Banks's enlightened experience, and how the principles-based work that we do has such a powerful impact on anybody of any age. And we're going to celebrate young people today. So Erika, would you be happy to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi there. Thanks for joining us. My name's Erika Bugbee. I'm the founder of Erika Bugbee Coaching. I'm in the US. I've been teaching these principles for 24 years now. I was part of a bigger group. Part of that group was my parents that were some of the early practitioners in the principles, George and Linda Pransky. And a lot of the reason that I work with young people is because I got so much help as a young person. And I saw something in me, and I can't unsee it now in young people. And so that's my passion. And then a lot of the work that I do, half my day is spent talking to teens and young people. So anyway, I'm glad to be here.
Isn't it a great job?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm Marie Arymar, and I'm the founder of Realization Works, which is a clarity coaching business. You know, my training has been mainly with Jamie Smart with clarity coaching, and I work, primarily with young people and their parents, although, you know, as with you, my clients are any age, but my passion is with younger people. And I think it does stem, as you said, from my experience as a young person myself, and having people see me for the truth of who I am, see me that I was actually okay when I really didn't feel okay. And I think that's my driver. And it's something I really enjoy. And I also do this work for a local charity. So I work with victims of crime, and it's all principles-based work. And, you know, it's powerful, as you and I are going to explore together. So do you want to kick off with your fantastic story that you shared with me?
Yeah. So a bunch of years back, I worked, I got a call from a single mom who had two kids, two boys, and said, you know, one of my kids is going to be expelled, basically asked to leave yet another school. And the principal said, look, I will give him another chance if he gets some help. And he had all this, he was diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder. He was just 15 years old. I'll call him Quinn. And it was interesting because Quinn had the incident that made him put him in this situation, the most recent incident. He'd thrown a chair across the room at a teacher. And anyway, what was so Quinn and his brother ended up coming out for my 4-day program. His younger brother just to accompany him. They flew across the country, stayed in a hotel. It was interesting is so Quinn shows up, and he's I didn't talk to him on the phone. I just thought, let me just send him here. He shows up. He's a short, stocky kid, all muscle, really wide shoulders, big neck, this big spiked mohawk, couple scars on his face, tattoos on his hands. He just was and he looked, he was kind of hard and a little bit, he was just very closed off. I mean, he was polite, but he was just very, very kept to himself. He didn't talk a lot. He didn't make a lot of eye contact. And so we talked, you know, the first day I was just trying to loosen him up. And it's interesting. We basically, I realized, so he's in a gang and his brother's in a gang. You know, they do a lot of street fighting and just a really rough culture. the one thing he would talk about where he got open was talking about his gang and his gang family. And so that's what we talked about. And one of the things that I could tell is for him, it was kind of all, you know, he mentioned respect. So we talked about respect. He said, you know, if somebody disrespects you, then, you know, you have to, it's on us to respond. Like respect is a big thing. If you don't have respect, you don't have anything. And so I was just interested when we talked about respect, and I basically mostly just listened and did a little bit of teaching here and there, but mostly was just interested in his outlook. It didn't seem like I was getting anywhere. Well, the next morning he comes in, and I could see he kind of, he was a little bit more open and a little bit more relaxed, and he talked more. So I thought, well, that's good. Well, the afternoon session, he comes back after his lunch break, and he's 45 minutes goes by and he's not there. And right at almost an hour, a cop car pulls up, and a cop gets out and lets my client Quinn and his brother out of the back of his car and drives off. And that had never happened before to me. And so Quinn wanted to meet. He still wanted to meet. And so he told me what happened. And basically he and his brother were looking for a gift for their mom in one of the shops. The shopkeeper was kind of eyeing them. And I'm sure because he had a mohawk, he looked like somebody that might steal. Well, she thought he stole something, and she accused him of stealing. He didn't, but she accused him of stealing, and called the police. And the cop drove around, found him, and brought him back to the shop and said, you know, can you give it back if you stole something? And he was adamant, I didn't steal anything. And, you know, but he said, I could feel myself starting to wind up. And while the shopkeeper says, this is his version of it, it was really funny. He said, you know, she's yelling at me and doesn't believe me and shouting at me. And while she's yelling at me, I realized she thinks I disrespected her. And he had this amazing epiphany. He didn't call it that, but his feeling was completely different when he came back and in telling this story. And basically he said, you know, I wanted to hate her, but I couldn't, because I realized, you know, when you have a thing about disrespect, you see it everywhere. And, you know, I was actually folding the shirt up to put it back. We decided not to buy it. He said, that was the most respectful thing I think I've done to an adult in a long time. He said, that's so funny. And here I'm buying a gift for my mom, which I've never done in my life.
I was thinking that.
Yeah. And he said, you know, I want to hate this woman. She's not listening to me. She doesn't get how much I'm actually being a good kid, but she doesn't get it. And he said it, and something, basically he said, you know, I realize I'm like this woman. I'm walking around angry and looking for confrontation and expecting it. And I'm bringing that with me into the world, and how much friction that must create just by the story that I'm reacting to. Basically, he saw I'm living in thought, and that's playing out, and that's what's happening. And he saw that happening in this woman while she was yelling at him. And what happened is he immediately softened up. He noticed the cop. He felt bad for the cop. He'd had a really bad history with police officers. He hated police officers. He said, you know, I realized like this guy probably wants to be out doing real police work. And here he is dealing with some punk kid and this shop owner that probably does this all the time. And he said, you know, I wanted to be mad and I couldn't. And it was so interesting because he changed. He softened up and basically came in with a chip on his shoulder and saw that he had a chip on his shoulder. And what what stood out to me so much about that story is that how much basically in my mind, what I see is, and I'm sure you see this too, Marie, is that there's the answers that we're looking for are in there, even if you're a big old mess. Like I helped him, you know, I don't know if maybe that wouldn't have happened had I not been here. Getting him to look at thought and how he sees things, but he's the one that saw, oh, this woman is me, and I'm doing what she's doing, and it forgave her. It showed him insight about him, and I didn't do that. And I think it blew me away that somebody that was so entrenched in his past and his story could wake up so fast.
Yeah.
And that's what struck me most about that story.
It's such a powerful story, and there's a couple of things I think. One is that we have no idea what somebody's heard, because they went off in their lunch break and they happened to go into that shop, and if that hadn't have happened, you know, we just don't know what they've taken on board, these young clients of ours. That's one thing. And the other thing, I keep thinking about the mirror. You know, it's like he looked in the mirror, instead of taking her action so personally, he was like, you know, I can see that this behavior, I can recognize this behavior.
Yeah, it's funny how easy it is to see thought in other people.
Oh yeah.
You know how to see, oh, well, she's making that up. Sometimes that's the only way that we're so close to it ourselves. We can't see, well, I'm in a story, but when you see it on somebody else, their stories look so ridiculous to us. I think that's what I love about young people, is they're surrounded. No one struggles more than a teenager. And everything's so precarious, and people turn on them so fast, and they think they have a friend for life, and all of a sudden they won't talk to them a week later. But what I love about that is they have the opportunity to see what they're walking around with. You're walking around with something it takes on a life of its own. And to everything that we share about thought is being demonstrated around them in a way that is so loud and hard to not see, that in a way it makes our jobs really easy.
Yeah, because often, you know, I just had finished a call just before we hopped on here together, and it was the last session with this 14-year-old girl, and she said, I don't know what we've talked about. She said, don't take this the wrong way. I hope this isn't bad. She said, but I can't remember anything that you've ever said. We have flip charts and drawings we've done together that she's got. And I said, what? I don't take that.
Talked about things, right?
Yeah, we sat in silence for like 8 sessions or something. But she said, I can't remember what you've said, but I feel different. And so we talked about that. And she said, I just feel calmer. Now, I haven't done that. But something about the space that we enable. I mean, the space that lad Quinn was in, he must have been in a space where he could quieten down enough to see something differently, to see respect or disrespect, the behavior of disrespect differently.
Yeah, I think I was struck the same way you were. I had to come back to when he said he bought a gift for his mom. He was looking for a gift for his mom, and he folded up the shirt. I said, you've got really good manners. He said, well, I don't normally have good, I've never bought a gift for my mom. you know, that's when that came out, as is he was, you know, he was softening up on his own, and we hadn't done a lot apart from just talking about how he sees life.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that old phrase, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I do think that when people, you know, are interested in change, or ready for change, want change, your wisdom shows you things that you might not have seen otherwise. And I think, you know, one of the other stories I wanted to share is about a 18-year-old that's more recent, that was at first year of college and had to come home early. She just got overwhelmed. She'd been diagnosed with ADHD her last year in high school, and college was so much harder. And she thought, well, I can't do this. And then she got really sick. She started having some health problems, and she had to come home from school early. She had to withdraw and come home early. And she just went into a depression. And basically she was living in a story of like, what if I can't function? What if I can't have a job? What if a job is too hard? What if I did okay in high school because high school's easy? You know, maybe I just went to a really easy high school. What if I can't live on my own? What if, you know, my friends are going to go graduate and live their lives, and I'm here and I'm not part of life anymore. You know, my life is taking off without me. And what was really sweet is that, in a way, she realized the same thing while we were talking. She said, you know, I'm afraid I'm going to be, there's something wrong with me. And my life is basically, this is the end of my life. And then we talked a few more minutes, and that was toward the end of one of our sessions. And she came back the next session. She said, and she was much more open and animated in our next session. It was only a week later. And she said, it's so funny. She said, you told me that I would see my own answers, and I didn't believe you. I was just waiting. I figured if we talked enough, you'd tell me what to do and how it was going to be okay. And she said, but I was listening to myself say, I feel like my life is over. And we got off the call, and I thought, that's the stupidest thing I've ever said. So I'm 18. How many people probably thought their life was over at 18? And she said, you know, something about, she said, you know, I kind of stopped taking things so seriously. And I realized, oh, I'm doing something in my head, I'm being dramatic. She said, I feel like I'm being dramatic. She always accuses her friends of being dramatic. She said, I feel like maybe I'm just being dramatic. And she lightened up. She said, I didn't even think about things. I figured, well, we'd talk the next time, you know, we talk next week. And I forgot about everything. And I realized, kept having these thoughts over the course of the week. Well, maybe I won't go back to school. Maybe that's not my path. So I have ADHD. Maybe maybe I need to focus on this. Maybe I need to focus on my health. She started having new thoughts about her life. And essentially they were thoughts of engagement, of, well, maybe I should, you know, maybe I should start waking up earlier. Maybe I need to use white noise. She had to finish some of her coursework at home while she was depressed. But what was so interesting is she said, I thought I was sick. And you wouldn't talk to me like I was sick. Like I could just tell you didn't see it, and you weren't having it. You weren't interested in what was wrong with me. And she said, you know, I don't think I've ever felt like maybe there was health, that I was healthy and that I could do life. until I heard myself say, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And she said, once I saw myself as, well, maybe I can get a handle on my ADHD.
Mm.
You know, maybe you can function with ADHD. Maybe we will sort out my health. So once I started being interested in what's possible, I got open, and all I could see was possibilities.
Mm.
And what was neat about it is, she didn't share this until a few months later. She said, I've always been a very serious, sort of cynical person, and felt like everybody else has it better than me. So I didn't realize that till it got so loud that I heard myself say it. So I've for the first time, I'm not interested in my story. Like the first kid, she said, I don't want to hear what's wrong. Once I got interested in that, I'm interested in like what I can do. All of a sudden, like, life came, my life came alive.
I love that.
And I didn't do that.
No. And I really love what you're saying. I think anybody who's listening to us, who's watching this, who really connects with younger people, because I think that rapport is so vital when we're working with a younger age group, well, any age group, right? But a younger age group, to have that feeling of rapport. And a lot of people say, you just listened, you didn't judge me. And I think that's part of our work, because we're not caught up in our own minds. We're as present as we can be, moment to moment, and we're observing. We're literally observing what's happening in front of us. And I think that doesn't happen very often. I really think it's a gift. And in that space, I think people see opportunities for themselves that just weren't available before this space for them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I think, at least for me, and this was the shift that happened for me when I was younger, is that I'm listening to them as if they'll figure it out. And I'm just hanging out with them and asking questions and being interested in their life, to give them space to reflect on what they're dealing with. And in that quiet and in that space that we've carved out together, you can't help but have new thought and new perspective when you look at something when you give it some space, and you have a feeling of interest and calm and curiosity and hope, that because I'm listening for their wisdom and their answers, and I trust that they'll get there.
Yeah.
And I'm not telling them I don't have to tell them what to do. And I think that's the difference, is I think a lot of the people around that are around young people, like their parents and their teachers, are afraid of them, are afraid of what they're going through. Teenagers, it can be, I don't know how you were as a teenager, but problems I had they were scary and heavy, and I had real mental health problems, and I was hostile. So not only was it probably overwhelming, but it wasn't pleasant at all. And I had that get away from me vibe, because I couldn't. There was so much overwhelm and chaos, and I was so agitated that I just was like, I didn't want people to talk to me.
Yes.
I think you get somebody that's interested in what they have to say, and, well, what do you think? What makes sense to you?
Absolutely. And I think that I say we talk to people's mental health. I don't go in from a place of mental sickness. I go in from a place of mental health. And I've got a few examples for you. And I really think, there's two things I think before I do that. I think the pandemic, you know, more and more as we come out of the pandemic and the longer we have, I see lots of school refusers. I see lots of people really struggling to pick their life back up. And that's really interesting work. And I'm also wondering about the fact that as our teenagers get older, often the mums are going into perimenopause. And I just think that's really fascinating that, you know, you're talking about teenagers finding life challenging. And then we've got, let's just look at mums, you know, going through a really interesting point in their own world. So I just think it's challenging. It really can be challenging. Just an observation.
And I think the fact that those kinds of challenges don't scare us. We're just more interested in, well, what does that mean? Maybe you need to, you know, create more space between you. Maybe you need to check the temperature in the room before you have conversation. The fact that we're not frightened by what they're up against, I think is often, at least it calms me down when I'm going through something and I'm talking to somebody that's just kind of, well, what do you think? You know, what makes sense? Or maybe that's not upset, or that's not, that doesn't feel like it's too much for me. It's just, I just need a little bit of that. Somebody that's not in a reactive state to me and my problem. And I think teenagers, it's like, they're just, you know, they're like, you know, like a pinball machine, you know, you have those there where you pull the thing. It is what kind of it feels like, at least it did for me, is like, you're just, everything you touch, you're like bouncing off of things and then bumping into other things. It just feels like chaos. And, but I think, you know, in the same way, you know, the ball always gravitates back down. I think at some point it does, you know, it finds a path through. And I think that's, you know, our outlook is just, well, you hang in there long enough with something and you'll either grow out of it, life will make it easier, or you'll see a way out. You'll see what to do. And in my mind, our job is just as people to kind of hang in there through the mess and stay out of the discouragement as much as we can. And a path opens. And I think that's the difference, is we really trust that, because they have everything we have. Life works exactly the same way, as even if the mess is more and the ball bounces around more, there's just one game.
What I see a lot is young people falling into a misunderstanding of their focus is being responsible for their parents. You know, they feel like they're the parent of the parent. And I've got a few examples of that. And so one is a girl who's 17. And she said, her testimonial was, I've learned to think about anxiety and worry in a different way. I know now that deep down I'm okay and I can cope with what I have to deal with, because she felt unable to cope. And the only way she felt able to cope with life was, I mean, if her parents went off in the car, she'd be beside herself with worry. And they'd have to text her regularly to let her know they were alive. And at night, she would not sleep, because like every hour she'd have to go and get up and tiptoe into their bedroom and put her ear near to their mouths and just make sure they were breathing. And she would do that all night, every night. And she was studying for her A-levels, which is your, you know, at the end of your high school equivalent, you know, before they're going to university. And she wasn't coping with attending school, and she wasn't able to focus on her studies, because she was so convinced that her responsibility was to check that her parents were okay. And there was such a confusion for her. And just as we looked at it together, she kind of started to laugh. And she said, it does seem a bit silly, doesn't it? Because every time I go and check, they are alive. And they always get to their destination and they come home again. And we're cutting a number of sessions short here, praising them down. But just like your girl, her story, she was starting to see through her behavior. And what she saw, instead of the kind of misunderstanding of the feeling of worry, she was seeing that she was being responsible, she was being protective, she was being loving and caring. And of course, what she was doing was actually reducing her life down to the tiniest version of herself. Mm. And I've got another story of a lad. This was with my the charity work that I do, and he was nearly 18, and I got told to go to his house, whereas a lot of my work is online, to go to his house. And it was in a very rural village in Devon, in the southwest of England, where I live. And it was an interesting house. It was kind of like, you wouldn't want these guys to be your neighbors. They were like washing machines and fridges and broken cars in the front. And, that kind of a house. It was, not so well cared for aesthetically. And I met this lad, and he was a big guy. He would have been playing rugby, big, mm-hmm. Tall, strong guy. And I sort of go into the front room, and there's bedding on the sofa, and there's a camping chair facing out of the window in the lounge. And so I'm sort of clocking it, and we're just talking. This is the first session, never met him before. And he says, he starts telling me about how concerned he is about his mother and his mother's behavior, and that he has to look after her, and he has to look after his 3 younger siblings who are much younger. I think possibly a different father. I can't remember. And he said that his mum gets into a lot of trouble in the village. She'll go to the pub and she'll get into arguments, and she's picked a fight with a guy who's an arsonist. Mm. And he's already been round, and he's set fire to the car. Mm. And he's convinced this guy is going to come back.
So he sits and watches.
Yeah. But so he was telling me that he had a job, he'd left school, he'd had a job, and he wasn't doing well at his job, and he was worried he was going to be sacked, and he wasn't sleeping. So I was like, well, is that your bed? And he said, yeah, that's where I sleep. And he's a big guy, and it's a small sofa. It's like, every night? He said, yeah, every night. And then, what's that chair? And he said, well, I sit up, vigil. He didn't use that word, but I'm the security guard.
I'm on watch.
All night. Yeah. All night. I'm like, all night, every night. And he said, yeah. And it's like, it's no wonder. It's no wonder you're not thriving in your job. Yeah, and right. You feel like your relationships are, he said, I don't have time for my friends. I want to learn to drive. I want to do this, but I can't do it because of my mum's behavior and because of this guy. And, the quote that, I read he saw for himself that he was okay, and he didn't need to spend his time doing that, being on vigil. Because it's like, well, how long have you been doing this? And he said, oh, like 4 months, like literally a huge amount of time. And how many times has this guy come? And he said, none, never. Why do you think that is? Well, the police are involved. So why are you still doing it? And he's like, I don't know, because I think I should.
Yeah.
And it's that it was just an opportunity for him to explore what's going on for himself with fresh eyes.
Yeah. It's funny because you can't, until it's a funny thing that you can have 2 completely different takes on something. When, say, you get a night's sleep, you get into a fight with someone, and then a few days goes by and you look at it again, and you're like, I can't believe I said that. How did it get, what were you even fighting about? How many times you have that thought, like, I don't even know why we're in a fight. That it's that you can be such a completely different person. And I think it's pretty amazing that that we can just take a second look and have everything have been completely reorganized, and in a way that has some order to it and some perspective and some common sense built into it, and nothing's changed. We just took another look and saw something different. And that's what I think so amazing about this intelligence, this universal intelligence that is what we call mind, is that you don't have to do anything but look again to have things reorganized in a way that gravitates towards more perspective, like the pinball. It's eventually going to make it back down to the paddles, and we don't have to do that. Like, the game is on a tilt, it goes downhill. And I think that's, with the passage of time, you never see things worse. And and that's why we're not afraid of working with teenagers or having a conversation with this guy, because they're in partnership with this intelligence, just like I am. It's just a matter of time before it finds its way through the cracks.
Yeah. Well, this, my lad and your lad were coming from love.
Yeah.
That feeling of protection, that feeling of care, that feeling of support. It's just that their behavior.
The loyalty is what really, and I heard it in your story too. Like, I don't know if I'd do that for somebody. I get you might like get frustrated. Look, you started it, you work it out with the guy. That's exactly it. That you're right. The love and the loyalty, and for us to be able to see past the mayhem of what they're doing, to see, well, you're just, bless their heart. They've organized their entire life. It's not working very well for them, but they're still doing it. Is really, it's really sweet.
Yeah. But in that story, the mum wasn't seeing how this behavior of being a security guard was not helpful either. She might have also fallen into the thinking that he was protecting the family, and he just turned around and said, not only am I not doing this anymore because it's not necessary, I'm moving out. And it wasn't, with my charity work, we get 6 sessions.
Right.
And within 6 sessions, he'd gone. And that wasn't about abandoning. That was about, it's time for me now.
Wow. As loyal as he was, the fact that he could see a path that is so completely different, that's always what blows me away, is that they got there in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. My very dear friend Liz Scott has got this really lovely story about her dog Buzz, and she says that every time the postman puts post through the letterbox, Buzz is a big dog, he runs up to the front door, barking, going crazy with his behavior every single time. And Liz, Liz said to her friend, who's like a dog behavioral, like a trainer, she said, why does he do it? The postman never changes. And she said, well, maybe Buzz thinks that because he does the barking, the postman doesn't come in. He's stopping the postman with his
breaking
behavior.
in and attacking.
It just hasn't occurred to him that the postman's never coming in, and it's a kind of waste of energy, And as I tell you the story about that lad, sitting watching guard over his family, it hadn't occurred to him that it wasn't going to happen, regardless of whether he forced himself awake all night.
Yeah, it's, once you look back on your logic, when you've kind of lost your way, it always makes sense. That's the problem, is
Yeah.
that there is logic in the crazy. And
Yeah.
but it's so funny when you look back on it, it does look, that's such a sweet story with the dog. Of course it would look that way. And the fact that we can wake up to that ourselves is, to me, is amazing. One of the things about the Quinn story that I thought was so cool is after he went home, so he spent the 4 days here, went back really a different person, softened up. And when he got back, in my follow-up calls with him that I did the next few months, he had convinced his brother to drop out of the gang and focus on school and graduate. He was so proud that his brother, he felt like we look out for each other. That's all we have. And we look out for mom. And they were sort of, his outlook really involved having his brother in his corner.
Yeah.
And I, and the other thing about this kid is he ended up, he got into a couple of altercations after he got home, but he served the detentions, which he had never done before. He said, yeah, I was out of line a couple of times. I didn't get violent, but there's one teacher I don't get along with. He said, ironically, I get along with almost every teacher, every staff, even the principal. I actually have a pretty good relationship with them. I joke around with them. There's one teacher I really don't like. He said, I was out of line. And he said, he provoked me because we have a bad history. But I didn't care that he provoked me. I did the detention. He said, I never would have done that before, because I was always about what's right and kind of making sure justice is served. And here's this teacher that I think he's a little bit out of line, but he said, I've heard a little bit about his personal life. I think he's going through a divorce. He said, I don't need to know what his story is. Just because it's, I did my part. That's all I need to focus on. And I think, the fact that through our struggles, all of us have come out the other side more mature, and seeing life in a way that has more truth in it. It doesn't matter where you start and who you are. That's always a constant of that. As the stories quiet down and you get a little bit of perspective and, as some wisdom comes in, the truth just ends up, you bump into it. You fall into it. The fact that we don't have to do anything for that. I didn't have to help him navigate when he got home or help him clean anything up. We didn't even talk about people. We didn't really talk about justice or people getting away with things. And here he is seeing, well, that's not a battle I want to pick. I'm just going to go serve the detention.
Yeah. It's just less important.
That's the thing. And I think that's what's so, it's so refreshing, because right now, all of us have things that feel really important. And I know at some point we're going to realize, like, that didn't need to be such a big deal. We'll have let go of certain things and roll with certain things. It doesn't matter that we're in the middle of a batch right now, because at some point we'll see our own way through these. And that, for me, makes me okay. It brings me patience and faith. I don't see what to do now, but I'm sure that I will. And I think a lot of that takes the urgency out of, how am I going to help this kid in 6 sessions? There's no urgency for us about this. I don't live and worry about my job and my clients, even though there's so much mess. And I think for us, that helps me trust, well, if they can do that, I can do this. It's kind of
absolutely, absolutely. And with the charity work, with the 6 sessions, sometimes after 4 they go, that's fine. I remember a girl, she was flashed at, you know, by flasher, and she couldn't leave the house. She was terrified of the thought of being out and wouldn't go out after dark. And it was a long time ago, and it's just occurred to me, I wasn't going to talk about her, but we ended up sort of playing with the idea, well, who would do that? Who would flash? You know, who I wonder, I love the I wonder game. And she's like, yeah, God, I wonder, maybe he's really unhappy, you know, and of course we don't know. It was just a game. And she said, I saw her on the 4th session. She said, you know, if it's right with you, I'm done. I said, what's happened? And she said, I just think I've taken my power back. So I've got one more little one that I really want to share with you. And then I just wonder whether maybe you've got a couple of takeaways that you've got, you know, from what you see as insights for young people. I kind of sprung that on you a little bit.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
But one I wanted to talk about was a lad who was he was 12 at the time, and it's not been that long ago, but he wasn't going to school because he said he felt really sick every morning. Every single morning. He was never sick, but he felt so nauseous that he couldn't go to school. And his mum was very, very alarmed, and they'd gone to the doctor, and the doctor, there was nothing that the doctor could see was wrong, and felt that it was some kind of anxiety. And he was missing school. And the more he missed, the harder it was for him to feel that he could attend school. And then if he did go, he'd leave by morning break because of the nausea. And the reason why I wanted to share this one was because, and one of the things that I feel is a really big insight that young people in my world get to see for themselves is that our feelings are actually our friends and not something to be afraid of. You know, the feeling of nausea was actually letting him know that, you know, his mind was caught up in whatever else was happening. It wasn't a sickness that he had to believe, because he believed it to be true. I'm going to be sick, even though I'm never sick, so I must stay at home. And through exploring that together, without focusing on it too much, it was like, oh, you know, so when I'm feeling sick, I'm getting really caught up in my own head, you know, and it's like, yeah, because what's going on for you when you're not feeling sick? It's like, well, I'm involved in doing this, or I'm playing with my mates, or and you could start to see the correlation of the power of believing that feeling, and how he was convincing himself it meant that he was sometimes on death's door. And I felt that was, as I mentioned to you earlier, that, you know, in what I'm seeing, the pandemic is, you know, has really affected a lot of young people in picking their lives back up. That was another example of how that seems to have played out. And it's like, oh, so I can go to school even though I'm feeling sick, because I'm actually not going to be sick. And actually, sometimes I might feel so sick that I do stay home from school, but I don't need to worry about that, because underneath it all, I'm still okay, despite the feeling sick.
Right.
And I think that's a really powerful one for me, because you can just take out the feeling sick with feeling anxious, or feeling worried, or panicked, or feeling whatever you want to feel.
And I think that's to me, you asked, you know, what are some of the common insights that I can see that teenagers kind of realize that gets them into another level of mental health. And that's one of them, is that just because there's mess doesn't mean there's something wrong.
Yeah.
That a lot of the things that happen to us while they're happening. We just haven't seen where to go yet, but we are going to see where to go. And we've always seen where to go. And sometimes where to go might be, I just have to come to peace with this, like that kid Quinn and his teacher. You know what? I just need to serve the detention and I need to let it go. Sometimes it means, no, I'm not going to let this go. I'm going to go, I'm going to take this on, and I need to have a conversation with this person. Or, maybe that what I need to do is, I'm going to leave school, or no, I'm going to stay at school and tough it out. And whatever the answer, there is one. And back to the first point I think I talked about is that we've always found our own answers. Everything we've gone through, and we've never been. And the problem is that we're never ready for what life throws at us. Whatever we have to deal with, if you look back to some of the things that you've gone through, that I've gone through, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know what I was doing. But it's not just you. You're in there with this universal intelligence that provides answers. It just doesn't do it on our schedule, doesn't do it as soon as we want. It might not be pretty. And I think, but to know, well, there's something that we're in partnership with. Even though when I get insecure, I feel alone. I don't feel like I'm going to see my way out of this. I don't think I can figure this one out. I think it's going to be just this bad tomorrow and next week. It doesn't feel like there's anything helping me along. And that's what being connected to the same intelligence that the rest of humanity is connected to. To me, that's one of the biggest insights that I think teenagers, they don't think, it feels like there's so much insecurity and isolation emotionally. It just really feels, even if they have close friends or they're close to their family, we're still walking a path by ourselves. Nobody can do it for us. But knowing, just because you feel alone doesn't mean you are alone. And the fact that what's providing for you, you might not be able to see it or feel it, but it's given you answers your whole life, and it's going to continue to. And it's not because you're lucky, it's because you're connected to something that the entire natural world is connected to. There's an intelligence there, and to be able to trust that that's there, even though I've forgotten it's there. I don't think it's there. It doesn't look like it's there. It's still there. That kind of, to me, that certainty, even when I get lost myself, it must be there. It can't, there's nobody born without it. I doubt I'm the first person. That's what allows, I think, teenagers to feel confidence and to feel patience, that this is just going to have to be messy until I see what to do. That sort of the ability to come to peace with mess and be okay with not knowing what we're doing until we do takes the pressure off and takes some of the panic away.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful thing that you've said. And I think that dropping into that quieter space, whatever they call it, for me, I think I can see that they're no longer blaming themselves for something. They're seeing a bigger picture. And the thing I've always noticed with younger people, even diddlers, lilies, they have so much wisdom. When you stop and listen, when you give them a chance to explore and express, that wisdom's there. It's not theirs, it's not yours, it's not mine. It's wisdom that we tap into, that we have access to. And isn't that great to know that?
Yeah.
I wish I had known that. Oh, Erica, it's been so lovely talking to you. I've
Yeah, it's
been
been
really
nice. I'm glad we did
forward-
this.
yeah, celebrating 3 principles-based work with younger people and how powerful it is in a world where I think that we focus on adults and younger people are seen as a different species sometimes. And of course, they're just younger people.
Yeah, everything's just louder for them. Yeah.
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 So thank you for your time.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for watching, whoever's watching this. And I hope it was helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.